What he found at midnight shocked him. His janitor was a secret musical genius.
Vincent Turner checked his watch as he walked out of the restaurant. 10:30 at night, and the business dinner had been a complete waste of time. 3 hours of small talk and expensive wine, and the investor still wasn't interested in his latest project. He loosened his tie and headed toward the parking garage, already planning tomorrow's meetings in his head. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "The contract you need for tomorrow's presentation is still on your desk. Sorry, forgot to remind you earlier." Vincent stopped walking and let out a long breath. Of course it was. The one document he actually needed, sitting in his office 15 miles away. He could drive home and come back early tomorrow, but traffic in the morning would be terrible. Better to just grab it now. He got in his car and drove through the quiet streets toward downtown. His office building was a 15-story tower he'd bought 5 years ago. Glass and steel, modern and expensive, sitting right in the heart of the business district. During the day, it buzzed with activity. Tech companies, law firms, financial advisors, all paying premium rent. At night, it was supposed to be empty except for security. Vincent pulled into the underground parking garage at 11:45. His footsteps echoed as he walked to the elevator. The building felt different at night, colder somehow. All that glass and marble that looked impressive during the day just felt empty now. He pressed the button for the 15th floor. His private office took up half the top level. Floor-to-ceiling windows, custom furniture, a view of the entire city. He'd spent a fortune decorating it, though he barely noticed the details anymore. It was just where he worked. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. Vincent stepped out into the dark hallway and reached for the light switch. That's when he heard it. Music, piano music specifically. Vincent froze with his hand on the light switch. The melody was faint but clear, drifting down the hallway from the direction of his office. Beautiful classical music played with skill and emotion. But that was impossible. The building was empty. And even if someone was here, who would be playing piano at midnight? Then he remembered. The piano. When Vincent bought the building, the previous owner had left behind a few pieces of furniture, including a vintage grand piano in what was now Vincent's office. A beautiful instrument, black and polished, probably worth a small fortune. Vincent had kept it because it looked impressive during client meetings. He'd never played it himself. Didn't know how. As far as he knew, it just sat there looking expensive. But someone was playing it now. Vincent's first thought was a break-in. But the security system hadn't alerted him. And what kind of burglar breaks into an office building to play classical piano? His second thought was that maybe he was hearing things. Long day, frustrating dinner, tired mind playing tricks. But no, the music was real. Complex and haunting, echoing through the empty building. Vincent walked slowly down the hallway, following the sound. His expensive leather shoes made no noise on the carpet. The music grew louder with each step. He recognized the style, though he couldn't name the piece. Something classical, European, the kind of music his mother used to play on the radio when he was young. His office door was open. Light spilled out into the dark hallway. Vincent approached quietly and peered around the doorframe. What he saw stopped him completely. An older man sat at the piano, his back to the door. He wore a janitor's uniform, the same dark blue coveralls that the night cleaning crew used. His gray hair caught the light from the desk lamp, positioned beside the piano. His hands moved across the keys with impossible grace, fingers dancing through a complicated passage without hesitation. Vincent recognized him. Thomas something. The night janitor who'd worked in the building for years. They'd exchanged nods in passing maybe a dozen times, brief hellos when Vincent worked late. A quiet man, probably in his 60s, always polite but never talkative. But this wasn't the same person. The janitor Vincent knew shuffled through hallways, pushing a cleaning cart, head down, invisible. The man at the piano sat straight and confident, completely lost in the music. His whole body moved with the melody, swaying slightly, his weathered hands creating something beautiful. Vincent stood in the doorway, transfixed. He'd been to exactly 2 classical concerts in his entire life, both times because a date had insisted. He'd found them boring, honestly. Too slow, too formal, not his thing. But this was different. Maybe because it was unexpected. Maybe because it was secret, not meant to be heard. Or maybe because the emotion in the playing was so raw, it was impossible to ignore. The man's eyes were closed. Tears ran down his cheeks, but his expression wasn't exactly sad. It was something else. Release, maybe. Or joy mixed with pain. Like the music was pulling something deep out of him. Vincent noticed other details. A worn cleaning cart sat against the wall, supplies neatly organized. Classical sheet music was propped up on the piano, pages yellowed with age, corners bent from use. A thermos and a pair of reading glasses rested on the small table beside the piano bench. This wasn't the first time. This was routine. How long had this been happening? How many nights had this janitor been playing Vincent's piano while he thought the building was empty? The piece built to a crescendo, the man's hands moving faster, pressing harder on the keys. Vincent felt the emotion of it, even without understanding the technical skill involved. This wasn't someone who'd taken a few lessons as a kid. This was real talent, professional level. Then the music stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy. The janitor sat perfectly still for a moment, hands resting on the keys, head bowed. Then he took a shaky breath and reached for his thermos. Vincent shifted his weight, trying to get a better view. The floor creaked. The janitor spun around so fast he nearly fell off the bench. His eyes went wide with terror when he saw Vincent standing in the doorway. The thermos slipped from his hand and hit the floor, coffee spreading across the expensive carpet. "Mr. Turner," the man gasped, standing up so quickly the piano bench scraped backward. "I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't be here. I know I shouldn't touch your things. Please, I can explain." Vincent held up a hand. "It's okay. You're not in trouble." But the janitor was already scrambling to gather his sheet music, his hands shaking. "I'll clean up the coffee. I'll pay for any damage. Please don't fire me. I need this job. I have a daughter in college, and the insurance here, it's the only way I can afford her tuition." "Stop," Vincent said firmly. "Just stop for a second." The janitor froze, sheet music clutched to his chest, looking like a kid caught doing something wrong. Up close, Vincent could see he was probably in his early 60s. His face was lined with age and worry, hands rough from years of manual labor. But those hands had just created something extraordinary. Vincent walked into the office and closed the door behind him. The janitor's eyes followed him nervously. "Sit down," Vincent said, gesturing to the leather couch along the wall. "Please, Mr. Turner, I really should just go." "Sit down." Vincent's voice wasn't angry, just firm. "I'm not firing you. I just want to talk." The janitor sat reluctantly on the edge of the couch, looking ready to bolt. Vincent pulled over his desk chair and sat facing him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Vincent could hear the city outside, cars passing 15 floors below, the hum of the building's heating system. "How long have you been doing this?" Vincent finally asked. The janitor stared at his hands. 3 years since I started working here. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Turner. I know it's wrong. I know I'm not supposed to touch anything. But the piano, it was just sitting there. And I thought maybe just once, just to remember what it felt like. Then once became twice, and twice became every night, and I couldn't stop. It's the only thing that makes the nights bearable." "You play every night?" "When you're not here? Yes, sir. Midnight to 3 a.m. I do my cleaning work first. Everything gets done proper. Then I play. Just for myself. I never thought anyone would hear. Nobody's ever here this late. Vincent leaned back in his chair. Where did you learn to play like that? The question seemed to surprise the janitor. He looked up, confused. You're not angry? I'm curious. That's not amateur playing. That's professional level. So where did you learn? The janitor's eyes got distant, remembering something. A long time ago. A different life. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. I just watched a janitor play classical piano at midnight in my office, like it was Carnegie Hall. I think I deserve an explanation. The older man was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I used to be good, really good. That was supposed to be my life. Music, performance, teaching. That's what I trained for. That's what I dreamed about. He looked around Vincent's expensive office. This isn't where I thought I'd end up. Vincent felt something shift in his chest, a question he didn't expect to ask. What happened? The janitor met his eyes. In them, Vincent saw 30 years of regret. Vincent leaned forward in his chair. I'm listening. Tell me what happened. The janitor looked down at his hands again, turning them over slowly, like he was seeing them for the first time. My name is Thomas Bennett. 30 years ago, I was a student at the Riverside Conservatory of Music. Full scholarship. Top of my class. I played in competitions, won most of them. My teachers said I had real potential, maybe even a shot at a professional career. He paused, and Vincent stayed quiet, letting him continue at his own pace. I was 22 years old and stupid enough to think talent was all that mattered. I practiced 8 hours a day. I lived and breathed piano. My whole future was mapped out. Graduate, maybe do a master's program, start performing professionally, eventually teach at a university. It was all I wanted. Thomas stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Then I met my wife, Helen. She worked in the conservatory library. Most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. We got married 6 months later. Too fast, everyone said. But when you know, you know. Vincent watched the older man's reflection in the glass. His expression had softened talking about his wife. We were happy. Poor, but happy. I was still in school. She worked part-time. We had a tiny apartment, barely any furniture, but we didn't care. I'd practice. She'd read. Perfect life. Thomas's voice cracked slightly. Then in my senior year, right before graduation, Helen got sick. Vincent felt his stomach tighten. He knew where this was going. Cancer, stage 3. The doctors said with treatment, she had a chance. Without it, maybe 6 months. Thomas turned back to face Vincent. Do you know how much cancer treatment costs, Mr. Turner? A lot. Everything. It costs everything. We had no insurance. I was a student. She worked part-time at minimum wage. The bills started coming, and they never stopped. Chemotherapy, radiation, hospital stays, medications. Tens of thousands of dollars. Then hundreds of thousands. Thomas walked back to the couch and sat down heavily. I dropped out of school 3 months before graduation. Took the first job I could find that had health insurance. Night shift at a warehouse. Terrible pay, but it covered Helen's treatments. I picked up a second job during the day. Slept maybe 4 hours a night. Stopped playing piano completely. No time, no energy. No access to an instrument, even if I'd wanted to. How long did you do that? 5 years. I worked like a dog for 5 years while Helen fought. She'd have good months where we'd think maybe she beat it. Then bad months where I'd wonder if I should start planning a funeral. The medical bills destroyed us. We lost our apartment, moved in with her parents. Declared bankruptcy. I was 27 years old and already felt like an old man. Vincent tried to imagine it. Being that young, that talented, watching your whole future disappear to save someone you loved. Did she survive? Thomas nodded slowly. She went into remission. 5 years of hell, and she actually beat it. The doctors called it a miracle. We called it worth every penny we didn't have. His smile faded. She lived 3 more years. Happy years, mostly. Then the cancer came back. Aggressive. In her brain this time. She was gone in 4 months. The office felt very quiet. Vincent didn't know what to say. What could anyone say to that? I was 35 when she died. Too old to go back to school. My scholarship was long gone. I'd been out of music for almost a decade. My hands were stiff from warehouse work. Even if I wanted to restart my career, I couldn't afford lessons or instruments or the time to practice. Thomas looked at Vincent directly, so I became a janitor. It paid better than the warehouse, had decent benefits, and I could work nights. Started sending every extra penny to my daughter for college. She was 12 when her mother died. I promised Helen I'd make sure our girl got an education, even if I couldn't finish mine. How old is your daughter now? 20. Junior year at State University. Wants to be a teacher. Smart as her mother, thank God. Pride crept into Thomas's voice. She doesn't know how close we came to not affording it. I work 3 jobs to keep her there. This one, plus weekend maintenance at an apartment complex, plus some handyman work when I can get it. Vincent did the math in his head. 3 jobs, probably 70 or 80 hours a week. When do you sleep? 4 to 5 hours most days. You get used to it. Thomas gestured toward the piano. That's why I play. Those few hours at night, midnight to 3, that's my time. My only time. I finish cleaning this whole floor by 11:30. Then I sit at that piano, and for a little while, I'm not a janitor. I'm not a widower struggling to pay bills. I'm just a musician again, even if nobody's listening. I was listening tonight, Vincent said quietly. You're incredible. That piece you were playing, what was it? Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major. It was Helen's favorite. I play it every night. Sometimes I imagine she can hear it, wherever she is. Vincent felt something twist in his chest. He'd spent the evening at a business dinner, talking about profit margins and investment returns. This man spent his nights playing love songs to a ghost while scrubbing other people's offices. Can I ask you something? Vincent said. Do you ever think about going back? To music, I mean. Professionally. Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. At 62? With hands that shake from arthritis? Without a degree or any recent performance experience? Who would hire me? Who would listen? I just listened? You're being kind, Mr. Turner. I appreciate that. But there's a big difference between playing for yourself at midnight and actually being a professional musician. That ship sailed 30 years ago. Vincent stood and walked to the piano. He ran his hand along the polished wood. This piano. I bought this building 5 years ago, and this was just sitting here. The previous owner left it behind. I kept it because it looked good, added class to the office. But I've never heard anyone play it. Didn't even know if it still worked properly. It's a beautiful instrument, Thomas said. Steinway grand, probably 1960s model. Needs tuning, but the action is still good. Someone took great care of it once, and now you take care of it. I try. I dust it every night before I play. Keep it covered when I'm not using it. It deserves respect. Vincent turned to look at Thomas. How many nights a week are you here? 5, Monday through Friday. I have Saturday and Sunday off, though I usually work my other jobs those days. And you play every night you're here? Thomas nodded slowly, probably wondering where this was going. Yes, sir. Is that going to be a problem? Because I can stop. I will stop. Please don't take this away from me. It's the only thing I have left that makes me feel like myself. The desperation in his voice hit Vincent hard. This wasn't about money or career. This was about identity, about holding on to the last piece of who you used to be. Vincent made a decision. He walked to his desk and pulled out a key card from the drawer, the kind that gave access to the building after hours. What if I told you I don't want you to stop? Thomas stared at him, confused. Sir, this building has top-level security. I can program key cards with specific access. This one would let you in through the main entrance after hours, give you elevator access to this floor only. Vincent held out the card. No more sneaking around. No more worrying about getting caught. You want to play piano at midnight? Play piano at midnight. Thomas didn't take the card. He just looked at it like it might bite him. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Because in the 15 years I've owned various office buildings, you're the first person who has made one of them feel like something other than a place to make money. Vincent set the card on the coffee table between them. Because you just told me you gave up your dream to save your wife. And that's either the stupidest thing I've ever heard or the most beautiful. I haven't decided which. Mr. Turner, I can't accept this. You can and you will. Consider it part of your employment benefits. Access to the piano, midnight to 3 a.m., Monday through Friday. Only conditions are you keep doing your cleaning job properly, and if I happen to work late and hear you playing, you don't stop. Deal? Thomas picked up the key card with shaking hands. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep playing. Vincent checked his watch. It was almost 1 in the morning. Actually, I have a question. Could you play something else? Something happy? I feel like we could both use that right now. A slow smile spread across Thomas's face. The first real smile Vincent had seen. Any requests? You're the expert. Surprise me. Thomas walked back to the piano and sat down. His hands settled on the keys, and for a moment he was still thinking. Then he started playing. Something light and quick, fingers dancing across the keys. Mozart, maybe. Vincent didn't know enough to identify it, but it made him want to smile. Vincent sat in his expensive office chair and listened. He'd come here to grab a contract. The one for your wife. I want to hear it properly this time. Thomas's eyes got bright. He nodded and turned back to the piano. The music filled the office once more, and Vincent closed his eyes and listened. Vincent couldn't sleep that night. He got home around 2 in the morning, but his mind wouldn't shut off. He kept hearing that piano music, kept seeing Thomas's face when he talked about his wife, kept thinking about talent wasted, dreams abandoned, years spent just surviving instead of living. At 7 a.m., Vincent gave up on sleep. He made coffee and sat at his kitchen table with his laptop. He typed Riverside Conservatory of Music into the search bar. The website loaded. Photos of young students with instruments, practice rooms, concert halls. Vincent clicked through the alumni section, searching for Thomas Bennett. Nothing recent, but he found an old archive page from 30 years ago. A grainy photo of scholarship recipients. There was Thomas, maybe 22 years old, sitting at a piano, young and confident. The caption read, Thomas Bennett, Presidential Scholar, Piano Performance. Winner of the statewide classical competition. Vincent searched for more. He found an old newspaper article from a regional competition. Thomas had placed first, beating students from conservatories across 3 states. The review called his performance technically flawless and emotionally devastating. He kept digging, found a program from a student recital. Thomas had performed 3 pieces, including the same Chopin nocturne he'd played last night. Someone had uploaded a scratchy audio recording to a music archive site. Vincent clicked play. Even through the poor quality recording, even 3 decades old, the talent was obvious. Thomas had been the real deal. Not just good, exceptional. Vincent closed his laptop and stared out his window at the city waking up. What do you do when you discover someone extraordinary working as a janitor in your building? Someone who should have been on concert stages, but instead empties trash cans for minimum wage? The obvious answer was nothing. It wasn't Vincent's problem. Thomas seemed content enough with his midnight piano sessions. Vincent had already been generous, giving him the key card. He could just leave it at that. But Vincent couldn't shake the feeling that doing nothing was wrong. Wasteful, even. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "I need you to research something for me. Find out everything you can about piano instruction in the city. Conservatories, private teachers, performance venues. Everything." "Is this for a new investment?" his assistant asked. "No, it's personal. Just send me what you find." The information arrived by lunchtime. Vincent spent his afternoon reading through it instead of working. He learned that piano lessons from quality instructors cost anywhere from $50 to $200 per hour. That concert halls could be rented for recitals, but required booking months in advance. That the conservatory Thomas had attended still existed and still offered programs, though tuition had skyrocketed. Vincent made notes, started forming an idea. Then he stopped himself. This was crazy. Thomas was 62 years old. Even if Vincent threw money at this, what would be the point? You can't turn back time. You can't undo 30 years. But the idea wouldn't leave him alone. That night, Vincent worked late on purpose. Around 11, he heard the cleaning cart in the hallway. Thomas appeared in his doorway, looking surprised. "Mr. Turner, I didn't expect you here tonight." "Vincent," he corrected. "And I wanted to hear you play again, if that's okay." Thomas smiled. "Of course. Let me finish the other offices first. Take your time." Vincent tried to focus on work, but couldn't. At midnight, he heard the piano start. A different piece tonight. Something bright and complicated, notes tumbling over each other. Vincent got up from his desk and walked to where Thomas sat. "What's this one called?" "Liszt, Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2. It's a challenge. My fingers don't move like they used to, but I try." Vincent pulled over a chair and sat, watching Thomas's hands navigate the difficult passages. Sometimes he stumbled, had to restart a section, but the music was still beautiful. When Thomas finished, Vincent asked, "Do you ever play during the day, when you're not working?" Thomas shook his head. "No access to a piano. My apartment building has thin walls. Can't exactly practice there, and I couldn't afford an instrument anyway. Used to go to music stores sometimes, just to touch the keys, but the salespeople would hover. Made me uncomfortable, so I wait for these nights. It's enough. Is it though?" Thomas looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You told me this is the only time you feel like yourself. 3 hours a night, 5 nights a week. That's 15 hours out of 168. Less than 10% of your life spent being who you really are. That doesn't seem like enough to me. It's more than a lot of people get. That doesn't make it right." Vincent leaned forward. "What if you had more time? More access? Vincent, I appreciate what you're doing. The key card, letting me play here. But I work 3 jobs. There is no more time. What if there was?" Thomas set his hands in his lap. "Where are you going with this?" Vincent hadn't planned to say anything yet, hadn't worked out the details. But the question came out anyway. What would you do if money wasn't an issue? If you had all the time and resources you needed? Would you want to play professionally again? Thomas laughed. "That's a fantasy question. Money is always an issue. Humor me." The older man was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Sometimes I dream about it. Playing for people again. Not big concert halls necessarily, just small venues. Coffee shops, community centers, anywhere people gather. I dream about teaching too, passing on what I know before it's gone. But those are just dreams, Vincent. Reality is 3 jobs and a daughter's tuition bills. Your daughter graduates next year, right?" "Yes. How did you know that?" "You said she's a junior. What happens after she graduates? When you don't have tuition bills anymore?" Thomas smiled sadly. "Then I'll be 63 with bad knees and arthritis, still working 3 jobs, because that's what I know how to do. Maybe I'll cut back to 2 jobs. Get a little more sleep. That's it? That's your retirement plan? Retirement is for people with savings accounts and pensions. I'll work until I can't anymore. Then I'll figure something out. Thomas stood and stretched his back. It's not a sad story, Vincent. It's just life. Most people don't get to do what they love for a living. I'm lucky I get these few hours. Vincent watched him gather his sheet music. Play one more piece before you go back to cleaning. Something you loved performing when you were young. Any particular reason? I'm trying to decide something. Your playing helps me think. Thomas sat back down and thought for a moment. Then his hands found the keys, and he started playing. Beethoven, Vincent thought. Something powerful and emotional. Thomas poured himself into it. Eyes closed, completely absorbed. Vincent pulled out his phone and quietly recorded a video. Just 30 seconds of footage, showing Thomas's hands on the keys, his face concentrated and peaceful. Then he stopped recording and just listened. When the piece ended, Thomas opened his eyes. Did that help? Yes, Vincent said. It helped a lot. After Thomas left to finish his cleaning, Vincent sat at his desk and watched the video 3 times. Then he opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in years. What if I told you I found a pianist worth hearing? Someone extraordinary who hasn't performed publicly in 30 years. I'd say that's a hell of a story. Is this person any good? Better than good? I'll send you a video. Watch it and call me back. Vincent, it's 1 a.m. I know. Watch the video anyway. Vincent sent the recording and waited. 5 minutes later, his phone rang. Where did you find this person? David asked. Those hands, that expression. That's not amateur playing. He's my night janitor. Silence on the other end. Then, you're what? Long story, but I want to help him. Get him back to performing. Maybe even teaching. I'm just not sure how. Why do you care? Not trying to be rude, but since when are you interested in classical music? Vincent looked at the piano sitting in his office, polished and cared for by a man who had every reason to be bitter, but somehow wasn't. Since I realized some things are more important than real estate deals. David was quiet for a moment. Okay, I'm listening. What do you need? Vincent took a deep breath. I need to know if it's possible. If someone this talented, this old, with no recent performance history, could actually make a comeback. Or if I'm just fooling myself thinking I can fix 30 years of lost time. That depends. How dedicated is this person? How much does he want it? Vincent thought about Thomas playing love songs to his dead wife at midnight. About him working 3 jobs and still finding time for beauty. About the careful way he maintained an instrument that didn't belong to him, just because it deserved respect. Have you ever walked past someone every day without truly seeing them? For Vincent, a sharp businessman in a high-rise office, the elderly janitor, Thomas, was just part of the background. A friendly nod, a quiet hello, that was the extent of their interaction. Vincent was busy climbing the corporate ladder, his days filled with meetings and deadlines. Thomas was busy keeping the shiny floor spotless, his movements slow and methodical, a man seemingly resigned to his quiet, invisible role. But one late evening, everything changed. Vincent was working late, trying to close a major deal. The office was empty and silent, except for the distant hum of the city and the soft, rhythmic sounds of Thomas's cleaning cart rolling down the hallway. As the cart got closer, another sound drifted into Vincent's office, faint at first, then clearer. It was music. A beautiful, complex piano melody, played with a skill that spoke of years of practice. But there was no piano in the office. Curious, Vincent stepped out of his office and followed the sound. It led him to the large, empty atrium where Thomas was taking a short break. The old janitor wasn't playing a real piano. He was sitting on a bench, his weathered fingers dancing on the marble surface as if it were a grand piano, his eyes closed, lost in the melody only he could hear. The tune was melancholic yet powerful, a story of longing and lost dreams played out on an imaginary keyboard. Vincent stood there, mesmerized. He had never seen this side of Thomas. The quiet janitor was transformed, his face filled with a passion and a sadness that was deeply moving. When Thomas finished his silent performance and opened his eyes, he was startled to see Vincent standing there. Embarrassed, he quickly tried to get back to his work, apologizing for the disturbance. But Vincent wasn't disturbed. He was intrigued. He walked over and gently asked, "That was beautiful. Where did you learn to play like that?" Thomas was hesitant at first, unused to such attention. But something in Vincent's genuine curiosity made him open up. He told Vincent his story. Decades ago, Thomas was a promising concert pianist. He had a scholarship to a prestigious conservatory and a future that seemed bright and full of music. He spoke of the thrill of performing, the way the music would flow through him, the applause of the crowd. But life, as it often does, had other plans. A family tragedy struck, forcing him to drop out of school to support his loved ones. He took on odd jobs, always telling himself it was temporary, that he would return to the piano soon. But soon turned into months, then years, and eventually 30 years had passed. The dream faded, replaced by the harsh reality of making ends meet. The piano gathered dust, a silent monument to a life he'd left behind. His hands, once destined for the world's greatest concert halls, now held a mop and a broom. Vincent listened, captivated and heartbroken by Thomas's story. He saw not just an elderly janitor, but a man whose spirit had been dimmed but not extinguished. He couldn't shake the image of Thomas's fingers dancing on the cold marble, playing a symphony of what could have been. Vincent believed that talent like that shouldn't be wasted, that it was never too late to reclaim a dream. He knew he had to do something. The next day, Vincent didn't focus on his business deals. He spent his lunch break making calls. He reached out to a friend who ran the local community arts center, a place dedicated to nurturing local talent. He told his friend about Thomas, about his incredible unseen talent and his forgotten dream. He pitched an idea. What if Thomas could teach piano to underprivileged kids? What if he could perform in the center's monthly showcase? Vincent secured an audition for Thomas. That evening, he found Thomas cleaning the conference room. He approached him not as a boss, but as a friend. "Thomas," he said, "I have an opportunity for you. The Community Arts Center wants to hear you play. They're looking for teachers and performers. This could be your chance to get back to your music." Thomas stared at him, his eyes wide with a mix of hope and sheer terror. 30 years. It had been 30 years since he had touched a real piano, since he'd performed for anyone. His hands were stiff, his confidence shattered. The thought of playing in front of people again, of being judged, was overwhelming. "I can't," he whispered, shaking his head. "I'm too old. I'm not that person anymore. What if I fail? I'm just a janitor." Vincent placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Being a janitor is what you do, Thomas. It's not who you are. Who you are is a pianist. A brilliant one. Fear is just a feeling. You can't let it be the final note in your symphony." He continued, his voice full of conviction. "Think about it. You could inspire kids who are just like you were. You could feel that magic again. What if you succeed? Isn't that possibility worth facing the fear?" Vincent's words hung in the air. For Thomas, it was a terrifying proposition. It meant facing the ghost of his younger self, the specter of his past failures, and the daunting possibility of a new beginning. He looked at his hands, the hands that cleaned floors but remembered the feel of ivory keys. He looked at Vincent, a man who saw past his uniform and heard the music in his soul. The decision was his. He could continue his life in the quiet shadows, his music forever a silent memory, or he could take this one terrifying leap of faith. He could walk through the door Vincent had opened and see if the music was still there, waiting for him after all this time. It was a choice between the safety of his current life and the unpredictable, beautiful, and frightening world of his long-lost dream. And for the first time in 3 decades, Thomas allowed himself to hope. What would you do in his position? It's a powerful reminder that it's never too late to pursue your passion. And sometimes all we need is for one person to see the potential we've hidden away. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring content. See you next time. Thomas's eyes got misty. That's either very generous or very sad. Probably both. Vincent smiled. So will you go to the audition? Thomas took a deep breath. I don't have appropriate clothes. Can't exactly show up in a janitor's uniform. What size suit do you wear? What? Vincent, no. You've already done too much. What size? Thomas sighed. 42 long. But seriously, I'll have something delivered to your apartment tomorrow. Wear it Friday. Impress them. This is insane. Probably. But it's the good kind of insane. Thomas folded the paper with the address and put it in his pocket. Okay, I'll go to the audition, but I'm not promising anything beyond that. I'll listen to what they have to say, I'll play something for them, and then I'll decide. That's all I'm asking. They shook hands, and Thomas left to finish his cleaning rounds. Vincent sat at his desk and pulled up his email. The suit was already ordered. He'd also arranged for the building's piano to be professionally tuned, contacted a hand specialist about treating arthritis in musicians, and researched performance anxiety therapy. Maybe he was getting ahead of himself. Maybe Thomas would bomb the audition. Maybe this whole thing was Vincent trying to fix someone else's life because he didn't know how to fix his own. But 3 nights later, when Thomas played at midnight, Vincent noticed something different. The music was the same, technically. Same pieces, same skill. But there was something else now? Hope, maybe, or possibility. The sound of someone who'd spent 30 years in a cage, realizing the door might be unlocked. Friday morning, Vincent texted Thomas. Good luck today. You're going to be amazing. The response came 10 minutes later. But thank you. For everything. Vincent tried to focus on work, but couldn't. He kept checking his phone. 2 o'clock came and went. 3 o'clock. 4. Nothing. At 5:15, his phone finally rang. So? Vincent answered without saying hello. Thomas's voice sounded strange. They offered me 12 students starting next month, and a spot in the October community concert. And Vincent, the director, cried when I played. Actually cried. She said it was the most beautiful audition she'd heard in 10 years. Vincent felt his chest tighten with emotion he didn't expect. So you're doing it? You're taking the job? There was a pause. Then Thomas laughed, and it was the sound of someone who'd forgotten now. I'm doing it. I put in my notice at all 3 jobs this afternoon. I'm terrified and probably crazy, but I'm doing it. You're not crazy. You're finally doing what you should have been doing all along. Maybe. Thomas's voice got quiet. Helen would have liked this. She always said I was meant to share my music, not hide it. Then let's make sure that's exactly what you do. After they hung up, Vincent sat in his office and smiled. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual chaos. But inside this building, something had changed. Someone had been found who'd been lost for 30 years. And somehow, in helping Thomas find his way back, Vincent felt like maybe he'd found something too. The next 2 months moved faster than Vincent expected. Thomas started teaching at the Art Center in September, working with students ranging from 6-year-olds taking their first lessons to adults who'd always wanted to learn. The director called Vincent weekly with updates, each one more enthusiastic than the last. "He's a natural teacher," she said during one call. "Patient, encouraging, and the students love him. We've already had 3 families specifically request him for their kids." Vincent visited the arts center once, quietly, just to watch. He stood in the hallway outside Thomas's teaching room and observed through the window. Thomas sat beside a young girl, maybe 8 years old, guiding her hands to the correct position. When she played a simple melody correctly, his whole face lit up with pride. The girl beamed. This was different from the midnight playing. That had been beautiful, but solitary. Music made for ghosts and memories. This was alive. This was shared. But the real test was coming. The October community concert. Thomas would perform 3 pieces in front of a live audience. His first public performance in 30 years. As the date approached, Vincent noticed Thomas getting nervous. He still came to the office building some nights, not to clean anymore, but to practice on Vincent's piano. Vincent gave him a permanent key and told him to come whenever he needed. 1 week before the concert, Vincent found Thomas at the piano at 11 p.m., playing the same passage over and over, getting frustrated with a section he couldn't quite nail. "It's not working," Thomas said, hitting a wrong note again. "My hands won't do what my brain tells them. I'm too old for this." "You're just scared." "Of course I'm scared. There'll be 200 people in that hall. Real musicians, music students, people who actually know what they're listening for. They'll hear every mistake." Vincent sat down. "Do you remember what you told me about your wife? About how she loved hearing you play?" "Yes." "Did she care about the technical perfection? Or did she just love the music?" Thomas stopped playing. "She used to say the mistakes made it more real, more human. Then play for her. Not for the critics or the students or anyone else. Play for Helen, like you've been doing at midnight all these years." Thomas's hands settled on the keys, gentler now. "What if I freeze up there? What if I forget everything? Then you start over. The audience will wait. They're not there to judge you, Thomas. They're there because they want to hear beautiful music, and you know how to give them that. You're coming, right? To the concert?" Vincent hadn't planned on it. Classical music still wasn't his thing. But looking at Thomas's nervous face, he couldn't say no. Front row. "I'll be the one who doesn't know when to clap." Thomas laughed, some of the tension breaking. "You clap between pieces, not between movements. I'll make sure the program is clearly marked for you." The night of the concert, Vincent arrived early. The venue was smaller than he'd expected, intimate rather than grand. Maybe 200 seats, wooden floors, good acoustics. People filtered in slowly. Families, older couples, college students with instruments cases. A community gathering, not a formal affair. Vincent took his seat in the 3rd row. Front row felt too presumptuous. He'd never been to something like this. Wasn't sure of the etiquette. The lights dimmed. The director walked out and welcomed everyone, explaining the evening's program. 3 performers total, all community musicians. Thomas would play last. The first performer was a young violinist, talented but clearly nervous. She rushed through her piece. The second was a middle-aged woman on cello, better, more confident. The audience clapped politely after each performance. Then the director announced Thomas. "Our final performer tonight is someone special. Thomas Bennett has been teaching here for just 2 months, but he's already touched so many lives. Tonight, he returns to the stage after a 30-year absence. Please welcome him." The applause started before Thomas even appeared. When he walked out, Vincent's breath caught. Thomas wore the suit Vincent had bought him, simple and elegant, but it was his face that struck Vincent. Terrified and determined in equal measure. Thomas sat at the piano and adjusted the bench. His hands shook slightly as he arranged his sheet music. The audience settled into silence. Someone coughed. A program rustled. Thomas placed his hands on the keys and froze. Vincent's heart pounded. This was it. The moment Thomas had been dreading. The freeze, the panic, the public failure. 5 seconds passed. 10. People started shifting in their seats. Then Thomas closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne filled the hall. Helen's favorite. Of course he'd chosen that. Within seconds, Vincent knew it would be okay. The nervousness fell away as Thomas lost himself in the music. His hands found their confidence, moving across the keys with the same grace Vincent had witnessed that first midnight. But this was different. The acoustics of the hall, the presence of an audience, the weight of the moment, it all added something. The music swelled and ached and breathed. Vincent saw people in the audience close their eyes, swaying slightly. A woman in front of him wiped tears from her cheeks. This was what Thomas had been meant to do. Not clean buildings or work 3 jobs, or hide his talent in empty offices. This, sharing something beautiful with people who needed beauty. The piece ended. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the applause erupted. Not polite, not obligatory. Real. People stood, clapping hard, some whistling. Thomas opened his eyes and looked stunned, like he'd forgotten there were people listening. He played 2 more pieces. A bright Mozart sonata that made people smile, and finally a complex Rachmaninoff prelude that showcased every bit of skill he still possessed. Each one met with stronger applause. When Thomas stood to bow, Vincent saw something he'd never seen before. Thomas wasn't just playing at being a musician anymore. He was one. Fully, completely. No more pretending or hiding. After the concert, people crowded around Thomas. Parents thanking him for teaching their children. Other musicians congratulating him. The director hugging him, saying something that made him laugh. Vincent hung back, watching. This was Thomas's moment. He didn't need Vincent hovering. But Thomas spotted him and waved him over. "This is Vincent Turner," Thomas told the small crowd around him. "He's the reason I'm standing here tonight. He gave me a chance when he had absolutely no reason to." People shook Vincent's hand, thanking him. He felt embarrassed. He hadn't done anything except notice something that was already there. Later, when the crowd cleared, Vincent and Thomas stood in the empty hall. "You were incredible," Vincent said. Thomas smiled, still holding his sheet music like a lifeline. "I made mistakes. 3 of them. Pretty obvious ones. I didn't notice. You wouldn't. But I did." Thomas looked around the hall. "And you know what? It didn't matter. Not really. The mistakes were just part of it. Part of being human, making music in the moment. Your wife was right then. She usually was." Thomas folded his music carefully. "My daughter came tonight. Did you see her? Back row, couldn't stop crying. She'd never heard me play before. Not really. She was too young when I stopped. Afterward, she said she finally understood who her father used to be. Who he is again now." Vincent's throat felt tight. "That's worth more than a perfect performance. Much more." Thomas extended his hand. "Thank you, Vincent, for hearing something in that midnight playing that I'd stopped hearing myself. For believing an old janitor could be something more." Vincent shook his hand. "You were always something more. I just turned on the lights." 3 months later, Vincent sat in his office working late. It was after 11, and he half expected to hear the piano. But Thomas didn't come to practice here much anymore. He had students to teach, performances to prepare for, a life that didn't revolve around stolen moments in empty buildings. Still, Vincent kept the piano tuned and ready. Just in case. His phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. "Are you at the office?" "Yes. Everything okay? Can I come play for an hour? I'm preparing a new piece, and your piano has better action than mine. Doors unlocked. Come whenever." 20 minutes later, Thomas arrived, but he wasn't alone. His daughter was with him, a young woman with her father's kind eyes. "Vincent, this is Jenny. She wanted to meet the man who changed her dad's life." Jenny shook his hand firmly. "Thank you. Seriously, I have my father back. The real one, not the exhausted version I grew up with. I'm glad I could help." Thomas sat at the piano, Jenny beside him. "I'm teaching her to play. She's a terrible student, can't keep rhythm to save her life. But she's determined." Jenny punched his arm playfully. "You're a terrible teacher. Way too picky." They bickered like this was a regular thing, easy and comfortable. Vincent watched them and felt something warm in his chest. This was what mattered, not the buildings he owned or the deals he closed. This connection, this rebuilding of what had been lost. Thomas played his new piece, something Vincent didn't recognize. Jenny watched her father's hands, trying to learn. Vincent worked at his desk, the music washing over him. At some point, he realized he'd stopped working and was just listening, enjoying it even. Maybe he was becoming a classical music person after all. When Thomas finished, Jenny clapped. "Dad, that was beautiful. Play it again?" Thomas looked at Vincent. "Do you mind?" "Play all night if you want. That's what the piano's here for." So Thomas played it again. And Vincent sat in his office, no longer working, just experiencing this moment. A father teaching his daughter. Music filling spaces that used to be empty. A janitor who became a teacher, who became a performer, who became himself again. Vincent thought about that first night, hearing impossible music at midnight, following it to find a man playing love songs to ghosts. Now the music was for the living, for students and audiences and daughters, for anyone who needed to hear that beautiful things still existed in the world. And somehow, in the middle of all of it, Vincent had found something beautiful too. Purpose, connection, a reason to keep those lights on late at night. The piano sang, and Vincent listened, and everything felt exactly right.